You can all join the palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. The palms down. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. There's nothing else to do on a Saturday morning. Can you all hear me okay in the back there? Because there are seats if you want to spread out and come forward. Nice to see you all. I had, I think, this morning probably the most, for me, like clear realization intellectually of something around Buddhist teachings that it was the most crystal clear in my head more than ever before in the past 20 years. And then all I could think about was, I never come in here, if you're brand new to this, I never come in here on a Saturday morning or Tuesday when I lead and have an idea of what I'm going to talk about ever. I just sit down and I start talking. But that came into my head this morning. I was like, oh, I'm going to sit down and that's exactly what I'm going to share when I start. And then all of a sudden, over the last 30 minutes, it became completely fuzzy again. That's all I got for you. But man, it was so clear. I got it, And when I say I got it, again, for those who might be new or don't know me, I'm not trying to come across as if I have, awakened or figured anything out, Clearly what I did immediately following that and what I'm doing right now is clear evidence of me understanding nothing. But in my head, it was so clear. And the teaching was around non-self, which is something that most often in Buddhist circles and kind of a Western context gets completely overlooked. And very rarely, at least from what I've seen, very rarely shared or talked about or, dare I say, taught. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but the main reason is how many of you think that you are you? Show of hands. How many of you think you are you? Yeah, all right. We're stuck on ourselves. And the Buddhist teaching says that everything, all of our suffering, all of our struggle, all of our chaos, all of our drama, all of our stress, all of our sadness, all of our anxiety, all of our depression comes from this attachment to the sense of self that we think is real. And it's such a foundational, fundamental teaching in Buddhism of non-self. But it gets overlooked and not taught a lot. So, I may say more on what was clear in my head, but at this moment, it's not clear at all. So I'm not going to say anything about it. But it was kind of cool. So when you get home, Google non-self, Buddhism, and read it a little bit and see what makes sense to you about it. See what doesn't make sense to you about it. I'll probably get into it a little bit after, maybe when I feel I have more time to kind of share it. But it's super important. And if you think about, well, one thing I realized is that, and I often joke that half the people who come here are therapists and the other half the people here are in therapy. And often there's a crossover between the two, right? Now, this deep teaching of non-self would put every therapist out of business. So if you don't want that to happen, then avoid the teaching of non-self. Because if there is no self, then who are you trying to fix? Who are you trying to heal? Who are you trying to understand? Who are you trying to make sense of your entire life's history of past trauma? Like, who is doing that? If there is no self, who's doing that? That's really what the question is about. So, now that I've cleared up all of that for you, as I like to do, right, David? We'll go ahead and we'll start with the meditation practice. Oh, you just missed it. All right. So a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences, most likely. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Same thing if you're on a cushion or a chair or a bench. Stomach push forward slightly, shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or on the lap, whatever's comfortable. And to our millions of YouTube followers, welcome. Thank you for being here. Most important with this practice, don't expect anything. You're not trying to stop the mind or think nothing. We're just going to sit and breathe. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. I'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return to breath. Where's your mind? Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments. Just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind Learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed. stressed, anxious. We began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, and disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often we think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice free. Learning to be with things as they are is incredibly difficult. We often want to try to change everything and everyone around us. And this practice is surrendering that idea and focusing primarily on ourselves. Focusing on what we think and what we say and what we do, and how that impacts everything around us. Very often, people have, none of you I'm sure, but some people I know have a very difficult time with life as it is. And so there's this constant need or craving or desire to change it. And so very often people find themselves in situations where they run from things. Anyone here ever tried to run from difficulties in your lives? 2 of you. All right, 4 of you. So we're often running from things. And there's this idea that if we change jobs, change relationships, change where we live, change our car, change our clothes, there's this idea that if we change the external things and people and places in our lives, then that'll make things better. But very often, not always, very often, what that means is we're just not able to be with ourselves as things are. And so we seek and crave and desire something outside of ourselves to change. But very often, not always, very often what's happening is the new car, the new house, the new relationship, the new job, the new whatever it is. It just allows our mind to get lost in something new and focus on something new because that seems exciting or different. But what happens to that new person, place, or thing eventually? What does it eventually become? Old. And then what do? Look for something new. And so there's this constant desire to just run away from how things are. And what this very often means, not always, but very often, this means we are not okay to be with ourselves as we are. We're not okay to be with ourselves as things are, so we distract from actually looking at what's going on inside of us with all these new shiny things around us. or dented things around us, whatever it is. I was referring to cars, just so you know. Right? I was thinking of a new shiny car, but a new car could also be a new dented car, right? And then the question is, why can't we just be with ourselves as things are? And that ties into this never-ending cycle of us creating stories in our head about ourselves, that we're not good enough, we're not this enough, we're not that enough. All the stories that we've been telling ourselves our whole lives have created so much discomfort in our own minds and our own hearts about ourselves. So we seek to fill that elsewhere. And when we recognize that this story is not actually who we are, it's just a story that you're telling yourself based on your life's experiences. This does not mean that many, most, or all of us in this room have not gone through tremendous challenges, difficulties, traumas, horrific situations in our lives. Many of us have. And it's different for each person. Not putting value on one experience greater or lesser than anyone else's. Our own experience of a situation is our own experience and is incredibly valid and important to recognize. But whatever that experience is, from when we were 5 years old, 10 years old, whatever it is, we've told ourselves this story our whole life. And that story has created this identity and this thing that we call ourselves. And we spend our whole life trying to fix and heal this self, instead of recognizing this has all been an experience and brought me to this present moment. Can I let go of the story that I'm telling myself and just experience life? So, with that, I'll pause. I always really prefer just to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we use the rest of our brief time this morning for that. And for those who are online, welcome again. Thanks for being here. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. So if you have questions, feel free to respond there or type something there, and I'll do my best to respond. So open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with.
So 2 days ago, I was out doing some shopping and having a peaceful day, and all of a sudden I feel this anxiety building up, and I stopped to figure out what it was. Well, I hadn't recorded the expenditures, and I came home and recorded the expenditures. But the fear, the anxiety was like it was life-threatening, and it wasn't. You know, I realized that's what it was. It wasn't anything critical. But can you speak to that, where something so simple can feel so threatening, or the mental process becomes like terrifying that I didn't do that?
Sure. Yeah, so the question, again, I'll just try to repeat things for those joining us virtually, and if I paraphrase things completely off, just let me know. So your experience was you were out shopping, and then all of a sudden you had this overwhelming sense of panic because you realized you hadn't recorded everything, or your expenditures, you hadn't written them down, and you just felt this complete sense of panic. And even though you knew it was I forget what word you used, but it was something.
Not life-threatening.
Thank you, not life-threatening. But can I speak to that? Is that the general? Yeah. Yes. That's called anxiety. Have you ever had full-blown panic attacks? Yeah, I have not, so I can't relate to them, but that's never been my issue. It was always anger and other stuff, but anxiety and panic was never one, except for when the Cubs were in the World Series. That was, and I say that very seriously. I'm just going to segue a little bit to, like, for the first time in my life, and I don't mean this I couldn't breathe. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't breathe. I was in complete state of panic. And this was over a baseball game, right? And my greatest thing after I got through it all was realizing, wow, this is what people live with every day. Like, I was, in a way, grateful that I had that experience, because for all of us, whatever triggers that panic or anxiety or fear is different. And again, same thing. What the trigger is irrelevant, meaning it's not more or less important than anyone else's experience of a panic attack or anxiety, right? But that experience seems so real. And in that moment, we do not have the ability, very well, depends on how bad an attack it is, to step outside. And like you said, even though you knew it wasn't life-threatening, telling yourself it's not life-threatening still didn't take away the anxiety, right? Or did it help?
I did calm down. I realized this wasn't life-threatening.
Okay. So that's the first step, is to realize it's not life-threatening. I don't know if you've heard me share this, but it's a great acronym I love, SOBER. Have you heard me share this before? So SOBER, when we find ourselves in moments of panic, anxiety, fear, anger, really for any emotion that is just destroying us, stop. Just completely stop whatever you're doing. I mean, if you're driving, don't like slam on the brakes, but stop safely. And then just observe. Observe what's going on. I'm walking through the mall, I'm shopping, and I am an absolute mess right now. Like, just observe it. Step outside yourself and look at yourself and see what's going on, right? And then breathe. Breathe meaning take a few deep breaths, 2 or 3 just deep breaths. Close your eyes if you're in the mall, wherever you are, out roaming around. Close your eyes, take 3 deep breaths. Then open your eyes. And then the next one really is to expand. And this is kind of what you described, and you realized it wasn't life-threatening. But expand to recognize that your entire life is much greater than that one moment. And that one moment will pass. And you'll probably make it through. And it sounds like you kind of realized that anyways, because that allowed you to settle a little bit. And then react or respond. Then move forward. But I think there's a stopping of the kind of downward spiral effect that is occurring in our minds that's incredibly critical. Anyone ever get angry about something? Anyone angry about something for like 10 years? 20 years? We got some older folks in here. Tom, I won't pick on you, right? But how long have you been angry about something?
I can think of things that are 50 years old.
50 years old, right?
Seems like that's enough.
My mom always said you only tease the ones you love, so that's, I love you, so I pick on you. 50 years is enough, right? 50 or 60. But wait, was that you years ago who shared the story about you were still upset about the person that you did something to in like 2nd grade? No. Okay. Then I can't retell it.
I can think of stuff that's old.
Yeah. All right. But so when these things occurred was 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago. And in our head, it's been spiraling for years. So this is where the practice of meditation is really critical. Because the practice of meditation is learning to stay present. Very often we make this mistake and think like, okay, I'm going to meditate because I'm stressed out or I'm anxious. And that's going to make everything okay. But meditation is like any other muscle that we're strengthening and making stronger. We're getting stronger at learning to be with life as it is in the present moment. And therefore, when we have these moments of tremendous anxiety, we can stop, observe it for what's really happening, which the fact that you hadn't documented your expenses is probably not the end of the world, like you said. And if you can just sit with that for a few seconds and breathe through it and come back to the present moment. But the more you practice daily, not once every 3 months, not once every 6 months, not once every 9 months, but if you do a daily practice of meditation, what you're practicing is learning to stay present. That's it. At least in my approach to meditation, how I was taught. You're just practicing being in present moment. And that, my friends, is what I alluded to earlier, that most people are just completely afraid to do. We have to learn to be present with things. And when we're present with things, we stop telling the story of what happened to us 20 years ago. Because every time we tell that story, we get hurt over and over and over again. And we just can't move past it. And it will destroy us our entire lives. Yeah.
I can add a little more about 20, 30 years ago. I became what I call financially sober. I went into a 12-step program and I got out of debt. And recording that was part of my recovery. So what was triggering is if I don't record this, I'll fall back into that behavior.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the word sober, because I'm not sober with my money now. But I was afraid that I might
Yes.
not be.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that kind of further explanation. So it's a very appropriate word for you to continue to carry around with you in a different meaning. And all of the Buddhist teachings for any addiction, as we talk about a lot with the recovery programs we have, all of these teachings of craving and desire and, getting lost in the story really does help. So, yeah, thanks. And it seems so real, isn't it, right? Like it seems like there's no way out.
Well, yeah, I was thinking of the person I was, as opposed to the person or whoever I am, whatever you or whatever the you is.
Yeah. Definitely. Thanks. Yes.
So I understand what you're saying about meditation and these thoughts and focusing on the present and being mindful. But if these thoughts come to you when you're not at a time or a place where you can actually meditate, they still invoke some kind of emotional reaction. What do you do if you can't take the time to stop everything, even if it's the 5 or 10 minutes, and do what you're saying? Because I do agree with you about the meditation, but there are times that I have these recurring things.
Definitely. Yeah, so great question. Just to repeat it, if I understand correctly, so you're saying that you understand the idea, the teaching behind being mindful with things and being aware of the thoughts as they arise. But what if in the moment recurring thoughts arise, really triggers emotions? I said the word trigger, you didn't, I think. And you don't have the 5 or 10 minutes to stop and do a meditation. What do you do? That's your question, right? Close, yeah. 2 things. I'll start with this way. One is kind of picking up where I left off, which is the more we practice, the easier that will become. Now, that doesn't solve your question. I just want to start there, not just for you, but for everybody. That the more we practice this stuff, the easier it becomes to come back to the present moment. Meaning, ultimately, we don't need 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes to meditate. We just need one breath. Years ago, somebody who's, they've been around the community here at Sangha for many years. And this was at the old Buddha Free location. And he was, he's here all the time now and still a dear friend. And so he wouldn't mind me sharing the story. But, he's one of those real problems with authority. I'll just put it that way. And again, I'm sure something none of you can relate to. And definitely didn't like doing things that were uncomfortable for him. So he started showing up to Buddha for You probably 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And at the beginning, I always asked people to join palms, right? And I'm facing that way. I don't know if you join palms or not. I don't really care if you join palms or not. That's completely up to you. You could all be giving me the middle finger for all I care, right? It's my practice. And so I'm just asking people, hey, you want to join palms? Join palms. You don't, right? But he shared with me, this was a few years later, how he hated that. It always felt like, some different upbringing for him, that I was like trying to force this heavy religious thing because I was telling him to bring his palms together, right? And he said that a couple years later, he found himself at work and he was in a just terrible moment, similar to maybe what you're describing, in that moment when something arises and you just want to explode. And he said, without even thinking about it, he just immediately put his palms together. And all of a sudden, everything's settled. So these aren't things that, even though I say, step away, take some deep breaths, right? That's kind of like step one. But that's a bad example. That's one step, a step. But another way to do it is ultimately, you don't have to do all that. You just find something to anchor you back to that present moment. There is no simple way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's lots of tricks you can do, the sober, things like that. You could, just tell yourself you're going to observe. Anyone have problems saying things to people that they just shouldn't say? Apparently Bridget does, right? So in that moment, just take a vow of silence. All of a sudden, someone pissed you off and you want to scream at them, and you tell yourself, I am taking a 3-minute vow of silence. So there's little tricks that we can use. I used to, like, when I would wear the mala beads all the time, when I first started this practice, and when I was younger, and I'd get really angry, and I used to punch people or things, right? Walls hurt. So I would make a fist and I would punch things. So I started wearing mala beads on my wrist, and I actually wore them around my hands, because every time I would get angry, I would squeeze it just out of habit. And then I would squeeze the mala bead. And the mala bead, to me, kind of like the joining palms, represented my own calm, peaceful space. So there are things we can use, but I get it. At that moment, like, you're in a meeting at work, or you're in a heated conversation with a friend or whatever it might be, you can't always just call the timeout and say, you know what, I'm just going to step away for 10 minutes. We don't always have that opportunity. Or if someone's yelling at you, you can't just close your eyes and take deep breaths all the time, right? Like, hang on, give me 5 minutes and then you can yell at me again, right? So we have to kind of come up with our own little trigger.
Yeah. Coming into moments like that, whether it's a one-time deal or it's something that's historical and it keeps coming back, it's not to say that you can't have a reaction to that.
Yes.
It's being aware of the situation, understanding that you are having a reaction to it, and then taking that and then not telling the story, continuing to tell the story or tell a new story, and how you then go from that reaction moving forward.
Yes.
As opposed to letting it just sit there forever, or to your just having no reaction at all and trying to let it just sort of happen.
Yeah, and just to share for those who didn't hear, kind of an additional or further clarification is it's not, what you're saying is, it's not that you can't recognize the reaction, the emotion that's arising, to see it and allow yourself to see it, but not needing to respond to it, as opposed to just kind of, instead of letting it pass like, 100 miles an hour, we can let it pass at 3 miles an hour and just watch it. Anger, 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 anger. Okay, back to here. So, yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Does that help at all? Any other final thoughts or questions? We can do one more before we wrap up here.
Just think about your comment about the non-self and being like, I don't even know what my question is, but like the healing piece of taking that journey to look at things that have traumatized you in the past or whatnot. I feel like that healing is necessary so oftentimes to get to a place where, you know, you can have awareness of things in your life. And so I don't really know what my question is, but
Yeah.
it's like tying that, you know, healing is an important piece of getting past the trauma so that you don't dwell on it in your life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that relate to this concept of non-self?
Sure.
I don't have enough time for that.
Yeah, no, let me just sum that up in 60 seconds. Yes, beautifully said. And the first thing I'll say before is that what you said, the part about that you feel, and I'm a big fan of therapy, huge fan of therapy, huge fan of therapists, huge fan of people being in therapy. Incredibly important. Let me just go on record of saying that for anyone who doesn't know me and thinks that I was telling people, oh, just stop therapy and understand non-self. Please don't do that. But what you said is that you feel the healing is important. The healing of past trauma, I'm paraphrasing here,
Yes,
is important so you don't dwell on it anymore.
correct.
Correct? What I'm asking, not answering, but what I'm asking is it remotely possible that one could not dwell on something having nothing to do with healing or not healing from it? If we don't constantly look back at things, this gets tricky because it did condition who we are, so it does impact us. So I don't want to say that it's not relevant. There's incredible relevance, and I've worked with trauma survivors for 25 years, right? There's tremendous relevance and importance in looking back at past traumas and healing from them. I'm just repeating that again. But I'm just suggesting or bringing up along the lines of non-self that if we are not looking back, what is there to heal? Not an answer, not a go forward strategy, just something to think about, which is really your question is just you're thinking about what I said about non-self, and you're tying it to potentially yours or everybody's personal journey with healing past traumas. And I truly believe intellectually and philosophically the Buddhist teachings on non-self takes care of all of that. Am I sitting here saying that I'm able to do it or able to even explain it? No, right? But it's something that I think deserves such a deeper exploration than I feel that modern day Western Buddhists give it. And there's so many reasons for that. One of them being, and that was kind of what I was getting to earlier, is so many people who come to Buddhism because one, their therapist told them to. So they're already in therapy. So many therapists have been introduced to mindfulness, meditation, Eastern teachings and philosophies. And so they've incorporated that into their life. So there's such a kind of a beautiful joining of, somebody said years ago, if you're in therapy, you should probably check out Buddhism. And if you're into Buddhism, you should probably be in therapy, right? There's a beautiful correlation between the two. I'm just bringing rise to this realization I had this morning that intellectually I feel like I began to understand how the teaching of non-self it like pulls the carpet, the rug away. Because the question is, who is needing healing? Again, I'm not responding to you expecting to receive this as an answer. I'm not even suggesting it as an answer. It's more of a, a thing. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll close. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just one thing that comes to mind in the Vedas. There is the mind and the thoughts and the idea of the self that is something that comes out of the past, of thoughts that get repeated. there's also the body that stores trauma.
Yes.
Wherever it stores it. And, just that came to mind.
Yes. Yes, the body stores it, absolutely, and we feel it, and it has an impact on our body. And it's being stored from our consciousness, our intellectual view. It doesn't get stored in the body without the conscious awareness of the experience. Does that make sense? Meaning, storing trauma in the body is not separate from consciousness of the experience. We can't separate the two. Consciousness of the experience, trauma, we store in our body and manifests physically in incredible, unhealthy physical ways. But it still had to come from the conscious awareness of it. Right? So, great, light, simple things to think about on a Saturday morning as you go into your beautiful weekends. So, always fun. We'll go ahead, we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, their family and friends that continue to suffer in pain at this time, to all of those in Ukraine, surrounding areas that have lost lives and suffer, those who lost lives in the shootings, in Texas, in Chicago, the children, and the parents and family and friends. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple about 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. So thanks for showing up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So just about every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. Recovery Sangha meets a few times a week, so anyone battling addiction, whatever it may be, as well as our family group has picked up the last few months. Really beautiful to see parents and kids gathering. It's still once a month over the summer. They have a social gathering at the Bay on July 30th, I believe. That's on the website. And then the next meeting will be in August. It's also there. Day of Silence retreat is coming up. It's the first Saturday of every month. So it happens prior to this. It's from 8 to noon. That does require an RSVP just because we cap it to about 17 people right now. Just so it's something we can manage on an early Saturday morning right now with our space. So if 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture for you, then I really suggest you try it for 4 hours. It's a great way to learn to just be with you. You're not nearly as bad as you probably think you are. So spend 4 hours of silence with yourself and it'll do good things for you. So thanks all for being here. If you want to help out anywhere afterwards, you know the drill. We'll do some watering, some leaf picking up outside. So thanks everybody for being here. Buddha View is open again downstairs if you need anything. And enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy thinking about all this stuff. So thanks.